The crystal champagne flute nearly shattered in my grip as my husband's voice echoed through Westbrook Financial's opulent ballroom. "She's just a housewife, folks. Makes a fantastic pot roast, though." While polite laughter rippled around me, I maintained the placid smile I'd perfected through 8 years as Mrs. Nathan Reed, all while knowing the briefcase locked in my car held documents that would transform me from dismissible spouse to majority shareholder and CEO before dessert was served. Documents that would force every person in this glittering room, especially my husband, to learn that Olivia Chen had never actually disappeared, but had instead been silently orchestrating the most stunning corporate takeover in Chicago's financial district, all from behind the facade of the perfect corporate wife. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from, and if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. The morning of the Westbrook Financial Annual Gala dawned like any other Tuesday in our suburban Chicago home. The September sun filtered through our kitchen windows as I packed our son Ethan's lunch, while simultaneously reviewing quarterly profit projections on my tablet, carefully angled away from the breakfast nook. "Mom, can you check my science project?" "Later?" Ethan asked, mouth half full of cereal. "Of course, honey. Just leave it on my desk in the study." I heard Nathan's footsteps on the stairs before I saw him. Crisp, measured, confident. The sound of a man who had never questioned his place in the world. He appeared in his tailored charcoal suit, already scrolling through emails on his phone. "Big day at the office?" I asked, sliding his coffee across the counter. "Westbrook's, announcing the Chicago expansion tonight," he replied without looking up. "Harrison's finally making his choice for the new regional director." I nodded, knowing more about the announcement than he could possibly imagine. "Sounds important." "Don't forget about the gala tonight," Nathan said, finally glancing at me. "Wear something conservative but elegant. The navy Dior would work. And try to talk about something other than your charity committee this time. These are serious finance people." Our son glanced between us, his 10-year-old face suddenly thoughtful. "Dad, why do you always tell Mom what to wear? She used to be a financial analyst before you got married. She probably knows more about business than most of your colleagues." A flash of discomfort crossed Nathan's face before his usual confident smile returned. "That was a long time ago, buddy. The market's completely different now." He ruffled Ethan's hair and kissed my cheek perfunctorily. "See you tonight. Car's coming at 7. After Nathan and Ethan left, one to his corner office at Westbrook, the other to 5th grade, I locked the kitchen door and entered my home office. Not the airy, Instagram-worthy space visible from the hallway with its organized craft supplies and volunteer schedules, but my real office. A converted walk-in closet accessible through a hidden panel in our master bedroom bookshelf. Inside was a command center that would make any Wall Street executive envious. 3 monitors displaying market trends, investment portfolios, and confidential financial reports. A secure phone line connected to partners in New York, London, and Hong Kong. This hidden room had been my sanctuary for 5 years, ever since I'd begun quietly rebuilding my career while maintaining the facade of the perfect corporate wife. I opened my laptop and dialed a secure video call. The face of Victoria Zhang, my former business school roommate and now managing partner at one of New York's most elite investment firms, appeared on the screen. "Everything set for tonight?" Victoria asked without preamble. "Almost. The board's approval came through this morning. Harrison's making the announcement after the main course." Victoria's expression remained professional, but I could see the gleam of satisfaction in her eyes. 8 years of planning, Liv. I still can't believe. We pulled it off? "Neither can Nathan," I replied dryly, mainly because he has no idea. The truth was both simpler and more complex than anyone realized. I hadn't always been just a housewife. 12 years ago, I'd been Olivia Chen, graduating summa cum laude from Wharton with job offers from the top financial firms in the country. I chose Westbrook Financial, drawn by their innovative approach to sustainable investing. That's where I met Nathan Reed, brilliant, charismatic, and the son of Harrison Reed's closest friend. Our courtship was a whirlwind of late nights analyzing market trends and weekend trips to financial conferences. When we married after 18 months, everyone called it the perfect match. Then came the Campbell account, a massive potential client that would establish Westbrook as a major player in environmentally responsible investing, my specialty. I'd spent months developing the presentation, analyzing the numbers, creating projections that were both ambitious and achievable. The night before the pitch, Nathan asked to review my work. "Just to give you some pointers," he'd said with his trademark confidence. I handed over my laptop without hesitation. We were partners after all. The next morning, I arrived early at the office to find Harrison Reed, CEO and founder of Westbrook Financial, clapping Nathan on the back. "Brilliant work, son. The Campbell team just called. They're signing with us. Your approach to sustainable yield projections was exactly what they needed to hear." Nathan's eyes met mine across the office. There was a flicker of something, guilt, regret, before it vanished behind his winning smile. "Just doing my job, sir." I discovered later that Nathan had emailed my entire presentation to himself, removed my name, and forwarded it to the client as his own work. When I confronted him, his response chilled me. "Be reasonable, Liv. They were never going to take a woman seriously with numbers this big. I did us both a favor." A week later, I discovered I was pregnant with Ethan. Nathan's next words cemented my fate. "This is perfect timing. You've been talking about taking a step back anyway. Now you can focus on being a mother while I build our future at Westbrook." I never formally resigned. Nathan simply informed HR I wouldn't be returning after my maternity leave. Just like that, Olivia Chen, rising star in sustainable finance, disappeared. For 3 years, I embraced motherhood wholeheartedly. Ethan was the joy of my life, and I cherished our time together. But as he grew more independent, the financial analyst in me grew restless. I began consulting anonymously through Victoria's firm, my Wharton network proving invaluable. What started as occasional advising evolved into managing substantial portfolios for select clients who didn't care about my identity, only my consistently excellent returns. Then came the day, 5 years ago, when I overheard Nathan on the phone with Harrison Reed. Westbrook was struggling. Their approach to sustainable investing, once revolutionary, had grown stagnant. Younger, more innovative firms were capturing the market. "We need fresh blood," Harrison had said, his voice clear on the speakerphone. "Someone who understands where this industry is headed." "I'm working on some new models," Nathan replied, but I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. That night, after Nathan fell asleep, I pulled out my laptop and began analyzing Westbrook's public financial statements. The company wasn't just struggling, it was in serious trouble. Their sustainable investment division, once the crown jewel, was significantly underperforming. Without a major overhaul, Westbrook would be forced to sell within 3 years. I stayed up until dawn, creating a comprehensive revitalization strategy. Not for Nathan, not even for Westbrook, but for myself. Because at that moment, I realized I'd never truly given up on my career. I'd just redirected my ambitions. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now back to where we left off. The next day, I called Victoria and outlined my plan. We would quietly, legally acquire enough shares in Westbrook Financial to influence its direction. With Victoria's connections and my strategy, we could save the company, and in the process, I could reclaim my professional identity. "Are you sure about this, Liv?" Victoria had asked. "It's going to take years, and Nathan will never forgive you." I thought about my son, watching how his father dismissed his mother's intelligence daily. I thought about the countless women at Westbrook who'd been passed over for promotions in favor of less qualified men. And I thought about myself, the financial analyst who'd allowed her voice to be silenced for too long. I'm not doing this for forgiveness, I replied. I'm doing it for justice. Victoria became my public face, gradually acquiring Westbrook shares through various investment vehicles. Meanwhile, I rebuilt my professional network under the pseudonym Olivia Chen Consulting, providing investment advice to select clients, including, ironically, several Westbrook board members who had no idea they were working with the CEO's daughter-in-law. For 5 years, I lived a double life, corporate wife by day, financial strategist by night. I attended charity luncheons and planned dinner parties, all while secretly directing complex investment strategies that consistently outperformed the market. Nathan remained oblivious, too absorbed in his own career to notice the changes in mine. The more he dismissed me publicly as just a housewife, the more determined I became to succeed. Which brings us back to this morning, the day of the Westbrook Financial Gala, when Victoria confirmed what we'd been working toward for half a decade. Our investment consortium now owned 51.4% of Westbrook's shares, and the board had approved our restructuring plan, including the appointment of a new CEO. Harrison thinks the consortium's choice is brilliant, Victoria said, scrolling through her notes. He has no idea he's been working with you for the past 3 years on those anonymous consulting projects. I sighed, thinking of the old CEO. Harrison Reed wasn't a bad man, just a product of his generation. He genuinely believed he was mentoring Nathan, grooming him for leadership. He couldn't see that his protégé's most innovative ideas weren't his own. What about Rebecca Taylor? I asked, referring to Westbrook's talented chief investment officer and Nathan's not-so-secret office romance for the past year. Victoria's expression darkened. Still planning her coup. According to our sources, she and Nathan are announcing their new venture tonight after Harrison reveals the Chicago expansion. They've been siphoning clients for months. The betrayal shouldn't have stung. Our marriage had been essentially over since I discovered Nathan's affair, but the professional sabotage was unforgivable. Nathan and Rebecca weren't just leaving Westbrook, they were deliberately weakening it to make their new firm more attractive to investors. They have no idea how many clients will stay with Westbrook once our new sustainable investment approach is implemented, I said, reviewing the projected numbers on my second monitor. Victoria nodded. The board is particularly impressed with the innovative risk assessment model. Harrison called it, and I quote, the most revolutionary approach to sustainable investing he's seen in a decade. I smiled, remembering the nights I'd spent developing that model, often with Ethan asleep on the couch in my hidden office. My son had grown up watching me work, asking questions about algorithms and market trends that would stump most adults. Unlike his father, Ethan saw nothing unusual about a woman excelling in finance. Have you decided how you're going to tell Nathan? Victoria asked, her tone softening. I closed my eyes briefly, picturing the scene at tonight's gala. The shock on Nathan's face, the disbelief from his colleagues. Part of me dreaded it, but a stronger part, the part that had been silenced for too long, couldn't wait to reclaim my voice. Harrison's making the official announcement after dinner, I replied. Nathan won't know until everyone else does. After ending the call with Victoria, I checked the time and hurried to my other duties. In the kitchen, I prepared Ethan's favorite after-school snack and reviewed the final details for tonight's revelation with my legal team. By the time I heard Ethan's backpack hit the floor in the entryway, I had tucked away all evidence of my financial dealings. Mom, you won't believe what happened in science class today, he called, bounding into the kitchen with the unlimited energy of a 10-year-old. Tell me everything, I smiled, setting aside thoughts of Westbrook, Nathan, and tonight's confrontation. These precious moments with my son, had always been real, even when the rest of my life felt like an elaborate performance. Ethan launched into a detailed description of his team's solar power experiment while I listened attentively. When he finally paused for breath, he fixed me with a serious look that reminded me startlingly of myself. Mom, can I ask you something important? Of course, honey. Why do you let Dad talk to you like you don't know anything? My teacher said that women can be anything they want. Bankers, scientists, even presidents. But Dad always acts like all you know is cooking and charity stuff. The question pierced my heart. Despite my best efforts to shield Ethan from the more dysfunctional aspects of our marriage, children see everything. I sat beside him at the kitchen island, choosing my words carefully. Sometimes, Ethan, people see what they expect to see. Your dad and I? We started our relationship with certain expectations, and over time, those became hard to change. But you're super smart about money. I've seen you in your secret office. I froze. My what? Ethan rolled his eyes in classic preteen fashion. Mom, I'm 10, not stupid. The bookshelf door isn't that hard to figure out. I saw all your computers and stock charts last month when I was looking for birthday presents. For a moment, I was speechless. Then a laugh bubbled up from somewhere deep inside me. The first genuine laugh I'd had in weeks. You know what, Ethan? You're right. I haven't been completely honest with your dad or maybe even with myself. But that's going to change, starting tonight. Because of the papers in your briefcase? He asked innocently. The ones that say Westbrook Financial Restructuring on them? I shook my head in amazement. My son was definitely my child. Yes, because of those papers. After tonight, things might be different around here. Are you okay with that? Ethan considered this with surprising maturity. Will you be happier? Less fake smiley all the time? I think so. Then I'm okay with it. He grabbed an apple from the fruit bowl. Can I play video games until dinner? After Ethan disappeared upstairs, I returned to my hidden office to prepare for the evening ahead. The navy Dior dress Nathan had suggested hung on the door, elegant, conservative, and entirely appropriate for a corporate wife. Beside it hung another outfit I'd purchased secretly, a tailored black suit with subtle pinstripes, paired with a deep emerald blouse that matched my eyes. For a long moment, I looked between the two options, considering the message each would send. Finally, I reached for the navy dress. It would be the last time I dressed to meet Nathan's expectations. As I prepared for the evening, applying makeup, with practiced precision, I thought about the day 8 years ago when I'd allowed Nathan Reed to redefine me. Not with malice or cruelty, but with the quiet, persistent assumption that his career mattered more than mine, that his ambitions should take precedence, that I would be content to become just a housewife. Tonight, Olivia Chen would step out from behind the curtain. The woman who had never truly disappeared, who had been watching, learning, and planning her return to the financial world that had once dismissed her. My phone buzzed with a text from Nathan. Car coming at 7. Don't forget your name tag says Mrs. Nathan Reed. Last time you told people your name was Olivia Chen, they looked confused. I smiled at my reflection in the mirror. No longer the practiced smile of the perfect corporate wife, but the confident smile of a woman about to reclaim her identity. Not this time, I whispered to myself. Tonight, everyone will know exactly who I am. As the sleek black town car whisked us toward downtown Chicago, I watched the city lights blur past the window, each glittering skyscraper a monument to ambition. Beside me, Nathan tapped rapidly on his phone, occasionally smiling at whatever he saw on the screen. Rebecca's already at the venue, he mentioned, not looking up. She says Harrison is in rare form tonight, very nostalgic, probably because of the announcement. I made a non-committal sound, wondering if Nathan had any idea how transparent his affair with Rebecca Taylor had become. The way he said her name, slightly softer, more intimate, was a dead giveaway. Not that I cared anymore, at least not romantically. Our marriage had evolved into a business arrangement years ago, with carefully delineated territories. His, the public world of Westbrook Financial. Mine, the domestic sphere he considered infinitely less important. At least, that's what he believed. Remember, the Andersons will be there tonight, Nathan continued, finally glancing up from his phone. Robert Anderson controls 3 board seats. Be extra charming. I smiled, thinking about my last confidential consultation with Robert Anderson 3 weeks ago, where I'd helped him restructure his family's investment portfolio for significant tax advantages. He had no idea the brilliant financial strategist he'd been working with was the same woman he'd dismissed as Reed's pretty wife at last year's holiday party. Of course, dear. I'll be sure to ask about their new vacation home in Aspen. Nathan nodded approvingly, completely missing my subtle sarcasm. Perfect. And if anyone asks what you do, just mention the Children's Hospital Charity Board and my garden club presidency, I finished for him. I know the drill, Nathan. He looked momentarily surprised, perhaps catching the edge in my voice. But before he could respond, the car pulled up to the gleaming glass tower that housed Westbrook Financial's headquarters. The annual gala was always held in the penthouse ballroom, 52 stories above Chicago's busy streets. A not-so-subtle reminder of how high one could rise in the financial world with the right connections and opportunities. Opportunities that had been systematically denied to women like me. As we rode the elevator up, I felt my phone vibrate in my clutch. Discreetly checking it, I saw a message from Victoria. Everything in place. Harrison will make the announcement after his speech at 9:30. The board members have been briefed. Good luck. Nathan was too busy adjusting his already perfect tie in the elevator's mirrored wall to notice my expression change from practiced placidity to momentary fierce satisfaction. When the elevator doors opened onto the penthouse level, we were immediately engulfed in the carefully orchestrated opulence of a high-finance celebration. Crystal chandeliers cast a golden glow over the room. White-gloved servers circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. A string quartet played softly in the corner. The space breathed old money and established power, despite Westbrook being relatively young in the financial industry at just 30 years old. Nathan, there you are. Harrison Reed's booming voice cut through the crowd. The CEO of Westbrook Financial was approaching 70, but still maintained the commanding presence that had helped him build his empire. Salt and pepper hair perfectly coiffed, his bespoke suit probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Behind him, like a shadow, stood Rebecca Taylor, Westbrook's chief investment officer, and, if my intelligence was correct, Nathan's partner in both business betrayal and infidelity. At 42, she was beautiful in that intimidating corporate way. Sleek blonde bob, razor-sharp cheekbones, and a red dress that managed to be both professional and provocative. Her smile faltered slightly when she saw me, genuine surprise flashing across her face. Olivia, we didn't expect you so early. The spouses usually arrive closer to dinner. I wouldn't miss Harrison's big announcement, I replied pleasantly. After all, Westbrook is practically family. Harrison clapped Nathan on the shoulder. That's the spirit. And don't worry, there'll be plenty for the ladies to discuss. My wife's planned some kind of artisanal cocktail demonstration after dinner. I bit back a response about my Wharton MBA and 7 years of anonymous financial consulting that had helped keep Westbrook afloat. Instead, I smiled politely and excused myself to get a drink, leaving Nathan to his mentor and his mistress. Addie, the bar? I requested sparkling water with lime. I needed absolute clarity tonight. As I turned back toward the room, I nearly collided with Margaret Chen, Westbrook's HR director, and the highest-ranking woman at the company besides Rebecca. Olivia, she said warmly, her eyes crinkling at the corners. It's been too long. Margaret had worked at Westbrook since its founding and had interviewed me for my position there 12 years ago. She'd been the only one to express genuine regret when Nathan announced I wouldn't be returning after maternity leave. Margaret, you look wonderful, I replied, genuinely pleased to see her. How's the diversity initiative going? She sighed, her expression momentarily darkening. Slower than I'd like. Rebecca keeps saying it's not a priority given our current challenges. I nodded understandingly. Perhaps things will change soon. Margaret studied me with sudden intensity. You know, I ran into Victoria Jang from Emerald Partners last week. She mentioned working with a brilliant consultant who reminded her of you. My pulse quickened. Margaret had always been perceptive. Really? What a coincidence, I murmured, sipping my water to hide my expression. Not such a coincidence, perhaps, Margaret replied quietly. Some of us remember Olivia Chen from Wharton, the one who developed that revolutionary approach to sustainable yield assessment before she disappeared. Before I could respond, we were interrupted by the chiming of a glass. Harrison Reed stood at the center of the room, calling for attention. Friends, colleagues, valued partners, welcome to Westbrook Financial's annual gala. Tonight is particularly special as we celebrate not just another successful year, but a new chapter in our company's history. Nathan materialized beside me, placing a proprietary hand at the small of my back. Harrison's starting early, he whispered. Rebecca says the board must have pushed for it. I nodded, scanning the room. The board members were gathered near the back, their expressions unreadable. Victoria stood among a group of investment partners, raising her glass subtly in my direction when our eyes met. Harrison continued. For 30 years, Westbrook Financial has been at the forefront of investment innovation. We've weathered market crashes, navigated recessions, and emerged stronger each time. But as any good investor knows, the key to longevity is adaptation. The room murmured in agreement. I noticed Robert Anderson watching Harrison intently, occasionally glancing at his watch. Tonight, I'm thrilled to announce Westbrook's most ambitious expansion to date, our new Chicago Sustainable Investment Center, which will revolutionize how we approach environmentally and socially responsible investing. Around me, people applauded. Nathan's grip on my waist tightened slightly. This was the project he'd been positioning himself to lead for months. This new division represents the future of Westbrook, and indeed, the future of financial services. Harrison continued, which is why its leadership required careful consideration. I felt Nathan straighten beside me, preparing for his moment of triumph. Rebecca Taylor had moved closer to the front of the room, her expression anticipatory. But before I announce our choice for regional director, I'd like to acknowledge the extraordinary circumstances that have brought us to this moment. Harrison's tone shifted, becoming more serious. The crowd grew still, sensing the change. 3 years ago, Westbrook faced significant challenges. Our sustainable investment approach, once revolutionary, had grown stagnant. We were losing clients to more innovative competitors. The board considered selling. Shocked whispers rippled through the room. This information had been closely guarded. What saved us was a series of anonymous consultations from a financial strategist of exceptional talent. Someone who completely reimagined our approach to sustainable investing. Someone whose identity remained hidden until recently. My heart pounded so loudly I was certain Nathan must hear it. His hand had dropped from my waist as he leaned forward, confusion evident on his face. Harrison surveyed the room. The board recently discovered that this anonymous savior, the architect of our renewed success, was working right under our noses. Rebecca Taylor stepped forward slightly, a practiced, modest smile on her face. Tonight, I'm not just announcing a new regional director, Harrison continued. I'm introducing Westbrook Financial's new CEO, as unanimously approved by our board of directors. The crowd buzzed with excitement and confusion. Nathan's posture had gone rigid beside me. You see, Harrison explained, our anonymous consultant wasn't just a financial genius. She was also the majority shareholder of Westbrook, having quietly acquired controlling interest through a series of strategic investments over the past 5 years. Rebecca's smile faltered. Nathan turned to me, his expression suddenly wary. What's happening? He whispered. I simply shook my head, motioning for him to listen. Ladies and gentlemen, Harrison announced, his voice rising with genuine admiration. It is my great honor to introduce Westbrook Financial's new Chief Executive Officer and the visionary behind our sustainable investment renaissance. A spotlight swung toward our section of the room, but instead of illuminating Nathan or Rebecca, it found me. Olivia Chen Reed. For one crystallized moment, the entire room was silent. Then a cacophony of reactions, gasps of surprise, scattered applause that quickly grew more enthusiastic, and beside me, Nathan's audible, "What the hell?" Harrison beckoned me forward. On legs that somehow remained steady, I made my way to the center of the room. "Many of you know Olivia only as Nathan Reed's wife," Harrison said, giving my hand a fatherly squeeze as I reached him. "But before that, she was Olivia Chen, one of the most promising financial analysts of her generation. While raising her son and supporting her husband's career, she quietly revolutionized Westbrook's investment approach through anonymous consulting that saved our company from obsolescence." The applause was deafening now, led enthusiastically by Margaret Chen and the board members. I caught Victoria's eye across the room, her expression a mix of pride and vindication. "Furthermore," Harrison continued once the noise had subsided, "through a series of exceptionally astute investments made through Emerald Partners, Ms. Chen Reed has acquired 51% of Westbrook's shares, making her not just our new CEO, but our majority owner." I stepped to the microphone, feeling the weight of every eye in the room. Nathan stood frozen where I had left him, his expression a complicated mix of disbelief, betrayal, and dawning realization. Rebecca Taylor had disappeared into the crowd. "Thank you, Harrison," I began, my voice steadier than I'd anticipated. "For those who only know me as Mrs. Nathan Reed, allow me to reintroduce myself. I'm Olivia Chen, Wharton MBA, specializing in sustainable investment strategies, and now, as Harrison mentioned, CEO of Westbrook Financial." The crowd's reaction was a fascinating study in human psychology. Shock from those who had dismissed me as just a housewife, vindicated nods from women who had experienced similar underestimation, and calculating reassessment from the power. Players who suddenly needed to recalibrate their understanding of the company's hierarchy. "My journey back to finance was unconventional," I continued. 8 years ago, after my son was born, I stepped away from public professional life. But I never stopped being a financial analyst. While I was supposedly just planning dinner parties and attending charity luncheons, I was also rebuilding my career on my own terms. I paused, finding Nathan's eyes in the crowd. He had recovered enough to maintain a neutral expression, though the muscle ticking in his jaw betrayed his tension. "Tonight marks the beginning of a new era for Westbrook Financial. Our Chicago Sustainable Investment Center will redefine industry standards for environmentally and socially responsible investing. And yes," I allowed myself a small smile, "I will be personally overseeing its development." I outlined my vision for Westbrook's future, the innovative risk assessment model I'd developed, our focus on transparent ethics, and the aggressive diversity initiative that would ensure talent at all levels was recognized and rewarded. Westbrook was founded on the principle that financial success and ethical responsibility can coexist, I concluded. Under my leadership, we will prove that they must coexist for true sustainable prosperity. The applause that followed was thunderous. Harrison raised his glass in a toast. "To Olivia Chen Reed and the future of Westbrook Financial." As glasses clinked around the room, I finally allowed myself to absorb the magnitude of the moment. After 8 years of living in the shadows, of having my intelligence dismissed and my ambitions minimized, I had reclaimed not just my career, but my identity. The receiving line that formed after my speech was a parade of revised perceptions. Board members who had previously struggled to remember my name now engaged me in detailed discussions about market projections. Junior analysts who had never met me approached with nervous admiration. "I had your case study on sustainable yield." "Projections at Wharton," one young woman whispered. You were my hero. Then you disappeared. I can't believe you've been here all along. Robert Anderson, the board member Nathan had instructed me to charm, approached with newfound respect. Olivia, or should I say Ms. Chen, I had no idea my brilliant consultant was you. Those tax optimization strategies for my family portfolio were genius. Thank you, Robert. And please, Olivia is fine. We've known each other for years, after all, even if you didn't quite recognize me across the consultation table. He had the grace to look embarrassed. Well, things are certainly going to be different around here. Yes, I agreed. They certainly are. Throughout the celebration, I was acutely aware of Nathan. He had recovered admirably from the shock, doing what he did best: networking, smiling, shaking hands. To anyone watching, he appeared to be the supportive husband celebrating his wife's success. But I knew better. The tight set of his shoulders, the too bright gleam in his eyes, the way his laugh never quite reached its usual volume, all betrayed his internal struggle. Finally, as the evening wore on, he managed to maneuver through the crowd to reach me. "A word in private?" he requested, his voice pitched low enough that only I could hear. I nodded, following him to a quiet corner of the ballroom, away from curious ears. "How long?" he asked once we were alone. "How long have you been planning this?" 5 years, I answered honestly, since I overheard you and Harrison discussing Westbrook's troubles, though the anonymous consulting started 3 years ago. He shook his head, incredulous. "All those nights you said you were working on charity committee reports." I was saving. "The company you were planning to abandon," I finished for him. "Yes." Nathan's expression hardened. "This is about the Campbell account, isn't it? You've been nursing that grievance for a decade." "This isn't about grievances, Nathan. It's about recognition, value. The fact that you still think this is about revenge rather than professional achievement says everything about why our marriage failed." He flinched at the word failed, glancing around to ensure no one had overheard. "What?" "About our plans?" he asked, his voice taking on a desperate edge. "What about your plans with Rebecca to start a competing firm using Westbrook's client list?" I interrupted coolly. "Yes, I know all about those too. The board has been briefed. Your credentials and building access will be revoked at midnight." Nathan paled. "You can't do that. My father and Harrison were best friends. This company was built on financial innovation, not nepotism," I corrected him. "Harrison recognized that, which is why he fully supports the transition." As if summoned by his name, Harrison appeared at my elbow. "Ah, there you are, Olivia. The Miyamoto delegation is eager to discuss the Tokyo expansion with you." He turned to Nathan with palpable awkwardness. "Nathan, my boy, I think it's best if we continue this conversation in my office tomorrow. 9 a.m.? Nathan straightened his shoulders, his Wall Street training kicking in. Never show weakness. Always project confidence. "Of course, Harrison. I'll be there." As Harrison led me away, I caught sight of Rebecca Taylor by the exit, her expression thunderous as she watched the interaction. Her plans for a spectacular departure, using Westbrook's clients to jumpstart a competing firm, had just imploded spectacularly. I should have felt vindicated, even victorious. Instead, I felt only a calm certainty that I was finally exactly where I belonged. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of congratulations, strategic discussions, and the surreal experience of being genuinely seen by people who had looked through me for years. By the time the gala wound down, it was past midnight. Nathan had disappeared, presumably to regroup with Rebecca and assess the damage to their plans. I found I didn't particularly care. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. The formal transition announcement to employees, meetings with major clients, the inevitable media storm once the story broke. But tonight, as Harrison walked me to my waiting car, I allowed myself to savor the moment. You know, the older man said reflectively, when I realized you were the anonymous consultant who'd been guiding our sustainable investment strategy, I was shocked. Not because you weren't capable. Anyone who remembered your work before you knew you were brilliant. But because you'd managed to accomplish so much while everyone underestimated you. I smiled, thinking of my hidden office, the late nights analyzing market trends while the rest of the house slept, the carefully constructed facade of the corporate wife that had allowed me to operate undetected. People see what they expect to see, Harrison. Nathan expected to see just a housewife, so that's all he saw. Harrison nodded thoughtfully. Well, I suspect no one will make that mistake again. He patted my hand avuncularly. Your office will be ready tomorrow morning. The corner suite with the view of the lake. Nathan's office, I observed. Your office now, Harrison corrected gently. As the car pulled away from the curb, I leaned back against the leather seat and finally allowed the tension to leave my body. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother, who was staying with Ethan. He just fell asleep. Said to tell you he can't wait to see Mom's new office tomorrow. So proud of you, daughter. A lump formed in my throat. The journey from brilliant young analyst to invisible wife to corporate CEO had been long and sometimes painful. But as Chicago's glittering skyline slid past my window, I knew the most important person in my life had never seen me as just anything. Tomorrow, Olivia Chen would officially return to the financial world that had once dismissed her. And this time, she wouldn't be hidden behind anyone's shadow. The autumn sunrise painted my bedroom walls gold as I awoke after barely 4 hours of sleep. For a moment, I lay still, wondering if the previous night had been an elaborate dream. The announcement, the speeches, the looks of shock and recalibration as the financial world adjusted to the revelation of Olivia Chen from behind the mask of Mrs. Nathan Reed. But the 3 phones buzzing simultaneously on my nightstand confirmed it had all been very real. My personal phone displayed dozens of congratulatory messages from old classmates and colleagues who had seen the press release. My anonymous consultant phone, soon to be retired, showed urgent requests from clients now discovering who had been advising them. And my new official Westbrook CEO phone, delivered to my home at 6 a.m. by Harrison's assistant, already contained 47 emails requiring immediate attention. A soft knock at my bedroom door preceded Ethan's tousled head peeking in. Mom, are you awake? Grandma's making pancakes and the news people are talking about you on TV. I smiled, patting the bed beside me. Come here, buddy. He bounded over and crawled under the covers, still in his space-themed pajamas. At 10, he was at that perfect cusp between childhood and adolescence. Old enough to understand complex situations, but young enough to still want morning cuddles with his mother. So it worked? He asked, his dark eyes serious. You're really the boss now? It worked, I confirmed, smoothing his hair. How do you feel about that? Ethan considered the question with endearing gravity. I think it's awesome. But Dad's probably super mad, right? Is he coming home today? The question I'd been dreading. Nathan hadn't returned home last night. Not unexpected given the circumstances, but still a reality that required explanation to our son. I don't think Dad will be coming home for a while, Ethan. Last night changed a lot of things. He's probably staying at a hotel while he figures out his next steps. Because you took his job? I winced at the simplification, but couldn't exactly fault a 10-year-old's perspective. Not exactly. Your dad was actually planning to leave Westbrook, to start his own company. He just didn't know I'd be staying. Ethan nodded sagely. With Ms. Rebecca, right? I heard you talking to Aunt Victoria about them. Sometimes I forgot how perceptive my son was. Yes, with Ms. Rebecca. So you and Dad are getting divorced? The directness of children could be breathtaking. Probably, yes. We've been unhappy. For a long time, Ethan. But that has nothing to do with you. We both love you more than anything. He seemed to absorb this without distress. I figured. You guys barely talk anymore unless other people are around. And Dad's always checking his phone and smiling at messages that aren't from us. My heart twisted. I'm sorry you noticed that. It's okay, Mom. I'm not a baby. He sat up, suddenly animated. Can I see your new office today? Grandma said it has a view of the whole lake. I laughed, grateful for his resilience. Yes, after school. I've arranged for a car to pick you up and bring you downtown. But first, I checked the time on my phone. You need to get ready for school, and I need to get ready for my first day as CEO. After Ethan scrambled off to get dressed, I allowed myself one more moment of private reflection. In the 8 years since becoming Mrs. Nathan Reed, I'd never imagined my return to finance would be quite so dramatic. I'd envisioned a gradual re-entry, perhaps starting my own small firm or accepting a mid-level position at a competitor. The path to becoming Westbrook's CEO and majority shareholder had evolved organically, born of necessity when I discovered the company's vulnerability and Nathan's planned betrayal. No time for rumination now, though. I had an empire to run. I chose my outfit with deliberate care, a charcoal gray pantsuit that conveyed authority without trying too hard, paired with a jade silk blouse that brought out the green in my eyes. My mother, visiting from San Francisco to help with Ethan during the transition, appeared in the doorway as I fastened a simple pearl necklace, her gift to me when I graduated from Wharton. So, she said, leaning against the doorframe with a coffee mug in hand, how does it feel to stop hiding? My mother had never approved of the way I'd seemingly abandoned my career for Nathan's. A pioneering biochemist who'd faced her own battles in a male-dominated field, she'd supported my decision to prioritize motherhood when Ethan was born, but had grown increasingly concerned as years passed with no sign of me returning to finance. She was one of only 3 people who knew about my double life as an anonymous consultant. Her basement had housed my first hidden office when I began trading under pseudonyms. Terrifying, I admitted, meeting her eyes in the mirror. Exhilarating, overwhelming. She nodded, understanding. Your father would have been so proud. My dad, a mathematics professor who'd encouraged my love of numbers from childhood, had passed away during my 2nd year at Wharton. He never got to see me graduate, never met Nathan or Ethan. But he'd instilled in me the conviction that financial systems were just elaborate mathematical puzzles waiting to be solved by those patient enough to see the patterns. I know, I said softly. I kept hearing his voice last night when I was giving that speech. Stand tall, Livy. You've earned your place at the table. Mom crossed the room and adjusted my collar slightly, an unnecessary gesture that was really an excuse for physical connection. You haven't just earned your place, daughter. You've bought the whole damn restaurant. I laughed, the tension breaking. Yes, well, the hard part starts now. Harder than secretly running a financial consulting business while maintaining the, perfect corporate wife facade and raising a child? Her eyebrow arched skeptically. Different, I clarified. Public hard. She kissed my cheek. You'll be magnificent. Now go show those Wall Street boys what Olivia Chen is really made of. The Westbrook Financial headquarters hummed with unusual energy as I stepped off the elevator on the executive floor. Conversations paused momentarily as employees noticed. Me, then resumed with increased intensity. News traveled fast in finance, and by now, everyone would have seen the press release announcing Harrison Reed's planned retirement and my appointment as CEO. Margaret Chen intercepted me before I reached the executive suite. Good morning, Madam CEO, she said, her eyes twinkling. Quite the entrance you made last night. Good morning, Margaret, and thank you for keeping my secret all these years. She fell into step beside me. I didn't know the full extent, but I always suspected there was more to Olivia Chen than Nathan allowed people to see. She handed me a tablet displaying the day's schedule. The executive team is assembled in the main conference room. Harrison suggested a brief introduction before The all-hands meeting at 10. I scanned the schedule, noting the relentless parade of meetings, briefings, and media interviews that would define my first official day. Has Nathan arrived? Margaret's expression turned carefully neutral. Mr. Reed attempted to access the building at 7 a.m., but was informed his credentials had been temporarily suspended pending today's security review. He expressed his displeasure to the lobby security team. I could imagine. Nathan's temper, while rarely directed at me or Ethan, could be formidable when his authority was challenged. And Rebecca Taylor? Called in sick. Though her assistant mentioned, she was seen leaving her apartment with multiple suitcases. Running, then. Probably wise, given the evidence of corporate espionage we'd compiled against her and Nathan. Not that I intended to pursue legal action unless forced. The public humiliation of their failed coup would be punishment enough. We reached the executive suite, where Harrison's assistant, now technically my assistant, stood and greeted me with nervous deference. Good morning, Ms. Chen. I've transferred all your appointments to the system and prepared the files you requested on the Chicago expansion. She gestured to the imposing double doors. Mr. Reed is waiting in the conference room with the executive team. I paused, processing. Harrison, you mean? She blinked in confusion. No, ma'am. Mr. Nathan Reed. He arrived about 20 minutes ago. Mr. Harrison said it was better to handle this privately before the all-hands meeting. Margaret and I exchanged glances. Harrison had always had a soft spot for Nathan, having watched him grow up as his best friend's son. It seemed he'd used his executive override to grant Nathan access to the building, despite the board's decision. Thank you, Jennifer. I'll handle it from here. Inside the conference room, Westbrook's executive leadership team, 12 division heads, the CFO, and Harrison himself, sat in uncomfortable silence around the massive oak table. Nathan occupied a chair near Harrison, his posture deceptively relaxed, though the whiteness of his knuckles as he gripped his coffee mug betrayed his tension. Ah, Olivia. Harrison rose to greet me, genuine warmth in his voice despite the awkward circumstances. Perfect timing. We were just discussing the transitional framework for the leadership change. All eyes turned to me, a mix of curiosity, apprehension, and in some cases, barely concealed resentment. I recognized the calculations happening behind those stares. Who would rise under the new regime? Who would fall? Whose allegiances to Nathan might now prove problematic? I took my place at the head of the table. Harrison had deliberately left the CEO's chair empty for me and set my portfolio down with deliberate calm. Good morning, everyone. I appreciate you adjusting your schedules for this impromptu meeting. I met each gaze directly, lingering last on Nathan's. I understand this transition comes as a surprise to most of you. I look forward to meeting with each division head individually over the coming days to discuss your specific areas of responsibility. The CFO, Lawrence Wilson, cleared his throat. A methodical, cautious man in his late 50s, he had always treated me with polite indifference. At company functions, Ms. Chen Reed, Chen, I corrected gently. I'll be reverting to my professional name. He nodded, recalibrating. Ms. Chen, the board's announcement mentions your role in developing our sustainable investment strategy over the past 3 years. Could you elaborate on that involvement? Many of us were under the impression that division was headed by... His eyes flicked briefly to Nathan. Other leadership. A diplomatic way of asking how I'd secretly been running major portions of the company while ostensibly being just the CEO's daughter-in-law. Of course, Lawrence. 3 years ago, Harrison engaged an anonymous consultant through Emerald Partners to reimagine Westbrook's approach to sustainable investing. That consultant was me, operating through a series of privacy agreements that kept my identity confidential. During that time, I developed the risk assessment models and ethical investment frameworks that have driven Westbrook's recent success in that sector. Nathan made a small, derisive sound. Anonymous consultant. Convenient way to avoid disclosing conflicts of interest while you were acquiring company shares. Harrison frowned. Nathan, We discussed this. The board's legal team has thoroughly reviewed all transactions. Every share acquisition was properly disclosed to the SEC. The anonymity of the consulting arrangement was at my insistence, not Olivia's. I kept my expression neutral. All of this is detailed in the materials being distributed to the company today. Complete transparency is my first priority as CEO. And what about the Chicago expansion? This from Rebecca Taylor's deputy, a sharp-eyed man named Daniel Park, who was clearly trying to determine where his loyalties should now lie. Ms. Taylor has been leading that project for months. The expansion will proceed as planned, I assured him, though with some modifications to the strategic direction. I'd like you to continue overseeing the operational aspects, Daniel, reporting directly to me until we appoint a new CIO. His relief was visible. One potential ally secured. I continued through the major transitional points, the revised organizational structure, key priorities for the first quarter, the media strategy for announcing the change in leadership. Throughout, Nathan remained uncharacteristically silent, watching with the focused intensity of a predator assessing unfamiliar terrain. When the formal portion of the meeting concluded, Harrison suggested the division heads prepare for the all-hands gathering, leaving just himself, Nathan, and me in the conference room. The moment the door closed, Nathan dropped his mask of professional composure. "You've been planning this for years," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Using my connections, my company, my reputation." "Your company?" I interrupted, keeping my tone level. "Westbrook Financial was never your company, Nathan. You were an employee, a valued one with family connections, but an employee nonetheless." Harrison winced at the frankness. "Now, Olivia." "It's all right, Harrison," I said, not breaking eye contact with Nathan. "Let's speak plainly. Yes, I've been planning my return to finance for years. Initially as an independent consultant, then as an advisor to Westbrook when I realized the company was struggling. The acquisition of controlling shares came later, after I discovered you and Rebecca were planning to leave and take key clients with you." Nathan's face flushed. "You had no right to go through my private communications. I didn't have to. Rebecca's assistant is remarkably loyal to Westbrook, if not to her boss. She brought us the client solicitation emails 2 months ago. That landed like a physical blow." Nathan looked to Harrison, perhaps seeking alliance, but the older man's expression remained grave. "I tried to warn you, son," Harrison said quietly. "Loyalty matters in this business. The Reed name opened doors for you, but it couldn't protect you from your own choices." Nathan stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the polished floor. "This isn't over. The board can't—" "The board voted unanimously," I cut in, "including your father's old friends. They recognized what you've apparently forgotten. Westbrook's success was built on financial innovation and ethical leadership, not family entitlement." For a moment, I thought he might lash out physically. His hands clenched into fists at his sides, his breathing shallow. But years of corporate training held. Never show emotion, never lose control publicly. "You've made a critical miscalculation," he said finally, his voice deadly calm. "You've been hiding behind anonymity for years. You have no idea what it takes to lead publicly. The scrutiny, the pressure, you'll crumble within a month. And when you do, don't expect me to clean up your mess." I regarded him steadily. "Thank you for your concern, but I'll manage. Your personal belongings have been packed from your office. Jennifer will escort you to collect them after the all-hands meeting. Your employment officially terminates at noon." It was dismissal, plain and simple. For a man who had spent his career dismissing others, especially women, the irony was unmistakable. Nathan's jaw worked silently for a moment before he turned on his heel and left, closing the door with exaggerated control that was somehow more unnerving than if he'd slammed it. Harrison let out a long breath. "Well, that could have gone worse." I gave him a wry look. "It still might. Nathan doesn't respond well to public humiliation. I expect he'll be calling in favors and spreading rumors by lunchtime. The financial community respects results above all, Harrison reminded me, rising to his feet with a slight wince. His artificial hip had been bothering him lately. And your results speak for themselves. The board wouldn't have approved this transition if they weren't confident in your abilities. We walked together toward the auditorium where 500 Westbrook employees would soon gather for the official announcement. Harrison's presence beside me, a visible transfer of authority from the company's founder to its new leader, was a calculated move to ease the transition. You know, he said thoughtfully as we neared the auditorium doors, I always hoped Nathan would grow into the kind of leader who could take Westbrook forward. He has charm, connections, but not the vision, I finished quietly. Or the ethics. Harrison nodded sadly. I should have seen it sooner. The warning signs were there, taking credit for others' work, the lack of original thinking, always looking for shortcuts. I thought about the brilliant young analyst I'd fallen in love with 12 years ago and the entitled executive he'd become. People change, Harrison, sometimes not for the better, and sometimes they surprise you by becoming exactly who they were always meant to be, he countered, nodding toward the auditorium where employees were already gathering. Ready to reintroduce yourself to the world, Olivia Chen? I squared my shoulders, feeling the weight of the moment, not just for me, but for every woman who had ever been underestimated, sidelined, or dismissed as just anything. I've been ready for 8 years, Harrison. Let's go. The Westbrook Financial Auditorium fell silent as I stepped onto the stage with Harrison. 500 employees, from senior executives to mailroom staff, stared back at me with expressions ranging from curiosity to skepticism to outright hostility. In the third row, I spotted Margaret Chen giving me an encouraging nod. Good morning, Westbrook, Harrison began, his familiar baritone carrying easily through the space. As you've likely heard by now, today marks a significant transition in our company's leadership. He proceeded to outline the official narrative, his planned retirement after 30 years at the helm, the board's unanimous selection of me as his successor, and my previously confidential role in revitalizing Westbrook's sustainable investment approach. The story was technically true, if somewhat sanitized for public consumption. No mention of Nathan and Rebecca's planned defection or my strategic acquisition of controlling shares to prevent a hostile takeover. While many of you know Olivia Reed as Nathan's wife, Harrison continued, she comes to this role with exceptional qualifications of her own. Wharton MBA, specialization in sustainable investment strategies, and a track record of innovation that has quietly transformed our company over the past 3 years. A murmur rippled through the audience. I could almost hear the recalculations happening, the mental adjustments as colleagues who had dismissed me at holiday parties or ignored me at company picnics suddenly realized who had actually been behind Westbrook's recent successes. When Harrison handed me the microphone, I took a steadying breath and stepped forward. Thank you, Harrison, and good morning, everyone. My voice sounded stronger than I felt. I recognize this announcement comes as a surprise to most of you. The traditional path to CEO doesn't usually involve 8 years of apparent absence from the industry. A few nervous chuckles from the audience. But my journey back to finance, and specifically to leadership at Westbrook, is perhaps less conventional than most. When I stepped away from public professional life after my son was born, I never stopped being a financial analyst. I just operated behind the scenes, developing the strategies and models that have helped position Westbrook at the forefront of sustainable investing. I outlined my vision for the company's future, an aggressive expansion of our sustainable investment division, enhanced transparency in all operations, and a renewed commitment to recognizing and developing talent at all levels. Some of you may be wondering about Nathan Reed's role going forward. I addressed the elephant in the room directly. Nathan has decided to pursue other opportunities outside of Westbrook. We wish him well in his future endeavors. More murmurs. In financial terms, pursue other opportunities almost always meant fired or forced out. Those in Nathan's inner circle looked particularly uncomfortable. Change can be unsettling, I acknowledged, but it also brings opportunity. Over the coming weeks, I'll be meeting with teams across all divisions to better understand your work, your challenges, and your ideas for Westbrook's future. My door is open. My ears are listening. I concluded with a quote from my father, the mathematics professor who had first introduced me to the elegant patterns underlying financial systems. The most beautiful equations are those that reveal hidden connections, relationships, that were always there, just waiting to be recognized. As the applause rose around me, tentative at first, then gathering strength, I felt a weight lifting. The secret was out. Olivia Chen was hidden no longer. The remainder of that first day passed in a blur of meetings, introductions, and media briefings. By late afternoon, my new office, the corner suite with its sweeping view of Lake Michigan, was filled with hastily delivered flower arrangements from business partners eager to curry favor with Westbrook's new CEO. Jennifer Harrison's former assistant, who was now mine, appeared in the doorway. "Your 4 o'clock is here, Ms. Chen." "Thank you, Jennifer. Send them in." I rose from behind the massive desk, Nathan's desk until yesterday, which felt simultaneously too grand and exactly right. Daniel Park entered, his expression considerably more deferential than it had been in the morning meeting. As Rebecca Taylor's deputy, he'd been positioned to become her second-in-command in the new firm she and Nathan had planned to launch. Now, with those plans in ruins, he was clearly scrambling to secure his position at Westbrook. "Ms. Chen, thank you for making time in your schedule." "Of course, Daniel. Please sit." I gestured to the chairs arranged around a small conference table by the window, deliberately moving us away from the power dynamic of the desk. "I understand you've been instrumental in developing the Chicago expansion plan." He nodded cautiously. "I've been handling the operational aspects, yes. Ms. Taylor oversaw the strategic direction." "And what is your assessment of the current strategy?" I asked, watching him carefully. Daniel hesitated, clearly weighing his response. Loyalty to Rebecca versus potential favor with the new CEO. "Professionally? I think it's too conservative," he finally admitted. "We're positioning ourselves as a slightly greener version of traditional investment services when we could be genuinely revolutionary." I smiled, pleasantly surprised by his candor. "I agree. In fact," I slid a folder across the table. "These are my preliminary revisions to the strategic plan. I'd like you to review them and give me your honest feedback." He opened the folder, his eyes widening as he scanned the first page. "This is ambitious. Necessarily so. The sustainable investment sector is evolving rapidly. Incremental changes won't keep us competitive." I leaned forward. "Daniel, I know you were close to Rebecca. I'm not asking for information about her plans with Nathan. We're already well informed on that front. What I'm offering is an opportunity to be part of something genuinely innovative, with appropriate recognition for your contributions." The implied contrast with Rebecca's leadership style wasn't subtle. According to our intelligence, she had been notorious for claiming credit for her team's work, a habit she and Nathan had in common. Daniel studied me for a long moment. "Why me? There are plenty of Westbrook executives with more seniority." "Because you saw the flaws in Rebecca's approach but stayed loyal to the company. Because you've consistently advocated for more progressive investment models, even when they were dismissed as too radical. And because you have nothing to prove to me, your work speaks for itself." He closed the folder. Decision made. "What do you need from me?" "Two things. First, a complete, honest assessment of where the Chicago expansion currently stands. Strengths, weaknesses, vulnerabilities. Second, I want you to lead the revised strategic implementation, reporting directly to me until we appoint a new CIO. Daniel's expression shifted from cautious to genuinely engaged. I can have the assessment on your desk by morning. As for implementation, I have some ideas that might complement your revisions. Good. Get me the assessment, then block 3 hours on Thursday to walk me through your implementation ideas. I stood, signaling the end of our meeting. And Daniel? This is a fresh start for everyone at Westbrook. Past allegiances aren't as important to me as future performance. He nodded, understanding the subtle reassurance. Thank you, Ms. Chen. I appreciate the opportunity. After Daniel left, Jennifer appeared again. Your son is here, Ms. Chen, and the Reuters reporter is scheduled in 30 minutes. My heart lifted at the mention of Ethan. Send my son in, please. And Jennifer? Let's reschedule the Reuters interview for tomorrow morning. Family comes first today. Ethan bounded into the office moments later, his backpack still slung over one shoulder, his eyes wide as he took in the expansive space. Whoa, Mom, this office is bigger than our living room. I laughed, some of the day's tension melting away as I hugged him. What do you think? Too much? He spun in a slow circle, taking in the floor-to-ceiling windows, the sleek furniture, the abstract artwork on the walls. It's awesome. Can I do my homework here sometimes after school? Absolutely. I pointed to a small conference room visible through a glass door. I've already asked them to set up a study space for you in there. That way you can work while I finish up and we can go home together. Ethan beamed, then grew suddenly serious. Dad was on TV today. They were talking about you becoming the boss, and they showed him leaving the building carrying a box. He looked really mad. I sighed, guiding Ethan to the sitting area by the windows. I'm sure he is mad, honey. This isn't how either of us planned things to go. Is he going to try to get the company back? Ethan asked, his perceptiveness once again catching me off guard. He can't, I assured him. Westbrook belongs to its shareholders now, and I represent the majority of those shareholders, but I chose my next words carefully. Your dad is a very proud man. He might say or do things that seem hurtful because he's feeling hurt himself. Ethan nodded thoughtfully, like when Jake Sullivan told everyone at school that he let me win the science fair because he felt sorry for me, when really he was just mad that my project was better? I smiled at the apt comparison. Exactly like that. If Dad says things about me, or about the company, that seem mean, try to remember he's processing a lot of difficult emotions right now. Okay. He fiddled with the strap of his backpack. Mom, are you going to be super busy now? Like, too busy for movie nights and stuff? The question pierced my heart. While building my secret career, I'd been deliberately present for Ethan, structuring my hidden work around his schedule to ensure he never felt neglected. Now, as a public CEO, those careful arrangements would be more challenging to maintain. Things will be busy for a while, I admitted. But never too busy for you. We might need to adjust some routines, but movie nights are non-negotiable. In fact, I checked my watch. What if we start a new tradition? Wednesday afternoon ice cream, in the CEO's office. I happen to know there's a fully stocked freezer in the executive kitchen. Ethan's face lit up. For real? Dad always said food wasn't allowed in the executive suite. Well, Dad isn't in charge anymore. I winked, rising to my feet. Let's go. Raid that freezer. As we walked hand in hand through the executive floor, passing startled employees who clearly hadn't expected to see the new CEO escorting a 10-year-old on an ice cream mission, I felt a profound sense of rightness. This was what success should look like. Not compartmentalized lives where family and career were in constant conflict, but an integrated whole where achievements in one area enhanced rather than diminished the other. The following morning brought the first real test of my leadership. The financial press had erupted with the story of my appointment. Housewife to CEO, The Secret Rise of Olivia Chen. Read the Wall Street Journal headline, and clients were calling with questions about Westbrook's direction under new management. More concerningly, Nathan had given an interview to CNBC in which he'd carefully implied that my appointment was more about diversity optics than qualifications. He hadn't said anything overtly sexist or demonstrably false. Nathan was too smart for that, but the insinuation was clear. I was a token female CEO, not a legitimate financial leader. He's trying to undermine client confidence, Victoria observed, during our early morning video call. Classic move. Create doubt about the new leadership, then swoop in to poach clients when they're nervous. I sipped my coffee, reviewing the media monitoring report Jennifer had prepared. Has he announced his new venture yet? Not officially, but there are rumors. Word is he and Rebecca have secured initial funding for a boutique firm focusing on high-net-worth clients, presumably the ones they were planning to take from Westbrook. I nodded, unsurprised. And how are Westbrook's shares performing? Victoria smiled. Up 3% in pre-market trading. The sustainable investment sector is responding positively to your appointment. Your reputation from your anonymous consulting days is paying dividends, literally. That was something, at least. The financial world might buzz with gossip, but ultimately it respected results. The Reuters interview is in 20 minutes, I noted, checking my schedule. Time to set the narrative straight. I'd just finished reviewing my talking points when Margaret Chen appeared at my door, her expression unusually grave. Olivia, we have a situation. The Morrison account. My stomach tightened. The Morrison Group was Westbrook's largest client, representing nearly 15% of our managed assets. Wallace Morrison, the founder and CEO, was old-school finance, the type who still believed business was best conducted on golf courses and in gentlemen's clubs. Let me guess. Nathan reached out to them. Margaret nodded. Wallace Morrison called? Personally. He wants to meet with you today to discuss the leadership transition. His exact words were, I need to look the new CEO in the eye before I decide whether to keep $1 billion under Westbrook management. I exhaled slowly. The Morrison account had been one of Nathan's primary relationships, one he'd specifically targeted for his new venture. If we lost them on my first official day as CEO, it would send a devastating message to the market and other clients. Clear. My schedule between 1 and 3 p.m. Have Jennifer make whatever arrangements Mr. Morrison prefers. Lunch, coffee, my office, his office. Margaret looked concerned. Wallace Morrison is traditional in his views. Nathan has been cultivating that relationship for years. I'm aware, I replied dryly. Nathan had often complained about the tedious golf games and cigar sessions required to keep Morrison happy. But I'm guessing what Mr. Morrison really cares about is his return on investment, not who's holding the clubs. After Margaret left, I opened my laptop and pulled up the Morrison Group's portfolio. I had actually restructured significant portions of it during my anonymous consulting period, improving their yield by nearly 11% year over year. Nathan had taken full credit, of course, presenting my strategies as his own innovations, which gave me an idea. I buzzed Jennifer. Can you pull the complete Morrison account history from the past 3 years? And find out if Daniel Park is available to join my meeting with Wallace Morrison this afternoon. While I waited for the files, I typed a quick email to Victoria, outlining my strategy for the Morrison meeting. Her response came almost immediately. Brilliant. He'll never see it coming. By the time Jennifer confirmed that Wallace Morrison had agreed to lunch at the Capitol Grill, Nathan's preferred venue for client meetings, I had a clear plan in place. I would need to be absolutely flawless in my execution, but if it worked, it would not only secure the Morrison account, but send a powerful message to any other clients Nathan might be targeting. As I prepared for the Reuters interview, I thought about the irony of the situation. For years, I had worked in the shadows, my contributions unacknowledged, my expertise dismissed because I was just a housewife. Now, in the harsh light of public scrutiny, those same dismissed qualities, my analytical precision, my strategic patience, my ability to see patterns others missed, would be my greatest strengths. The reporter from Reuters arrived promptly. At 9, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who clearly didn't expect to be impressed by a CEO who had seemingly emerged from nowhere. "Ms. Chen," she began after the preliminaries, "many in the financial community are questioning your qualifications for this role, given your apparent absence from the industry for the past 8 years. How do you respond to suggestions that your appointment was motivated by factors other than merit?" And there it was, Nathan's narrative already taking root. But I had been preparing for this question my entire professional life. "I understand the skepticism," I replied, my tone measured but confident. "The traditional path to CEO typically involves a very public career trajectory. Mine has been unconventional, by necessity. But I'd invite anyone questioning my qualifications to examine Westbrook's sustainable investment performance over the past 3 years, specifically the risk-adjusted returns of our ethical portfolio, which has outperformed the market by 17% under my guidance." The reporter's eyebrows rose slightly. "You're saying you were directly responsible for those returns? Because many attribute that success to Nathan Reed's leadership. The attribution of credit within corporate structures is often imprecise," I said diplomatically. "What matters is that those strategies, which I can demonstrate I developed, have delivered exceptional value to our clients. In finance, results speak louder than resumes." She leaned forward, interested now. "And what would you say to clients who might be concerned about continuity during this transition?" I smiled, thinking of my upcoming lunch with Wallace Morrison. "I'd say watch our performance closely over the coming quarters. The proof of leadership isn't in titles or announcements. It's in consistent, sustainable results. And on that front, I'm extremely confident in Westbrook's future." As the interview continued, I felt myself settling into a new rhythm, not the careful, constrained persona of Mrs. Nathan Reed, nor the anonymous strategist operating from the key. Shadows, but something entirely new. Olivia Chen, CEO of Westbrook Financial. A woman who had reclaimed not just her career, but her entire identity. By the time the reporter left, promising a balanced piece for the afternoon edition, I felt more centered than I had in years. The path ahead would be challenging, Nathan's. Attempts to undermine me were just beginning, and the financial world was watching my every move with skeptical eyes. But for the first time in nearly a decade, I was standing fully in my power, no longer hidden behind anyone's shadow. Jennifer appeared at my door. "The car is ready to take you to lunch with Mr. Morrison, Ms. Chen, and Daniel Park is waiting to brief you on the account details." I gathered my portfolio and stood, smoothing my jacket. "Thank you, Jennifer. Let's go show Mr. Morrison exactly who's been managing his money all along." The Capitol Grill epitomized old-school financial power: dark wood paneling, leather chairs, discreet service, and the unspoken understanding that real decisions happened here rather than in official boardrooms. As Daniel Park and I followed the maitre d' to a corner table, I felt the weight of eyes tracking our progress. Word of my appointment had clearly spread throughout Chicago's financial district. Wallace Morrison rose as we approached, a courtesy I suspected he rarely extended to business associates. In his mid-60s, with a shock of white hair and the robust physique of someone who could afford the best health care, Morrison exuded the confidence of a man accustomed to controlling every room he entered. "Ms. Chen," he extended his hand, his grip firm but not aggressive. "Or should I say Ms. Chen Reed?" "Chen is fine, Mr. Morrison," I replied, matching his direct gaze. "Thank you for making time in your schedule on such short notice." His eyes flicked to Daniel, clearly expecting Nathan instead. I was surprised by yesterday's announcement. Nathan has been handling my accounts personally for years. I introduced Daniel as our sustainable investment specialist, deliberately omitting his previous connection to Rebecca. As we settled into our seats and ordered drinks, sparkling water for me, scotch for Morrison, I could feel him assessing me, searching for weaknesses. "I'll be direct, Ms. Chen. Morrison said after our drinks arrived. I have over $1 billion under management. With Westbrook. That relationship was built on personal trust with Nathan Reed and his father before him. Yesterday, I learned from CNBC that there's an entirely new leadership structure, and my calls to Nathan go straight to voicemail. He leaned forward slightly. You can understand my concern. I nodded, allowing his words to hang in the air for a moment, a negotiation tactic my father had taught me years ago. Rushing to fill silence often revealed anxiety. Patience projected confidence. Your concern is completely valid, Mr. Morrison, I finally replied. Significant changes in leadership naturally raise questions about continuity and expertise. That's precisely why I wanted to meet with you personally on my first day. He seemed slightly mollified by the deference, but his expression remained skeptical. Nathan always had a solid grasp of my investment priorities. We spoke the same language. Smiled, opening the portfolio I'd brought. Absolutely. Like your preference for sustainable energy investments with a 10-year horizon, your aversion to certain pharmaceutical companies based on ethical concerns, and your interest in expanding your Southeast Asian holdings, particularly in green infrastructure. Morrison blinked, clearly surprised by the specificity. You've done your homework. Actually, Mr. Morrison, I've been directly involved with your portfolio for nearly 3 years. I slid a document across the table. This is a complete analysis of your account's performance since 2022, with detailed breakdowns of which strategic adjustments yielded the most significant returns. He glanced down, his eyes widening slightly as he registered the comprehensive nature of the analysis. If you'll turn to page 4, I continued, you'll see that the diversification strategy implemented in Q3 of 2022 reduced your volatility exposure by 17% while increasing overall yield by 9.3%. That strategy was my design, as was the ethical screen we developed specifically for your family foundation in 2023, which allowed you to maintain your return requirements while aligning more closely with your stated values. Morrison looked up sharply. Nathan told me he developed those models. I'm sure he believed he was representing the company accurately, I replied diplomatically, though we both recognized the polite fiction. The point is, Mr. Morrison, while the face of your relationship with Westbrook is changing, the expertise behind your exceptional returns remains consistent. In fact, I nodded to Daniel, who handed Morrison another document. We've prepared some preliminary recommendations for the coming quarter that build on our successful approach. Morrison studied the new document, his financial acumen evident. In the rapid way he absorbed the complex projections. This renewable infrastructure plays a role in Vietnam. It's aggressive, but well hedged, I pointed out, leaning forward to indicate a particular section. We've developed a unique risk mitigation strategy that protects your downside while maintaining substantial upside potential. The projected ROI over 5 years is 23% above market, with significantly reduced carbon exposure, something your foundation board specifically requested last quarter. For the next 40 minutes, we delved into the technical details of his portfolio. With each question Morrison posed, I responded with precise, substantive answers that demonstrated not just theoretical knowledge, but practical experience with his specific investments. Daniel provided excellent support, particularly on the operational aspects of the Vietnam project, but it was clear Morrison was primarily assessing me. As our lunch plates were cleared, Morrison leaned back in his chair, studying me with new interest. You know, Nathan always handled these meetings alone, said the technical details would bore me, that I should focus on the big picture. I bit back a smile. Nathan had often complained that Morrison didn't understand the nuances of modern sustainable investing, a convenient cover for his own limited grasp of the models I'd developed. Different leaders have different styles, I offered diplomatically. I believe clients like yourself deserve full transparency and as much detail as you wish to engage with. Morrison nodded slowly, a decision visibly forming. Nathan called me this morning. said I should consider moving my accounts to his new venture, that the changes at Westbrook might destabilize my portfolio. I had expected as much, but the confirmation still stung. And what are your thoughts on that suggestion? Initially, I was inclined to agree. Better the devil you know, as they say. Morrison's shrewd eyes held mine. But it seems the devil I knew wasn't actually handling my investments. After all, I allowed myself a small smile. Mr. Morrison, I understand loyalty is important to you. It's important to me as well. My loyalty is to Westbrook's clients and their financial success. I've demonstrated that commitment through results, not rhetoric. Morrison signaled for the check. I'll be keeping my accounts with Westbrook, Ms. Chen, but I'll be watching the performance very closely. The renewable infrastructure recommendations you've outlined, implement them. Let's see if they perform as expected. Thank you for your confidence, Mr. Morrison. We won't let you down. As we shook hands to conclude the meeting, Morrison held on a moment longer than necessary. One more thing, Ms. Chen. Nathan suggested your appointment was more about diversity optics than qualifications. My expression remained neutral despite the flash of anger. Did he? Having spent the last hour discussing complex financial strategies with you, I find that assessment difficult to reconcile with your obvious expertise. Morrison's eyes crinkled slightly. Perhaps Nathan's judgment isn't as sound as I once believed. It was as close to an apology for doubting me as I was likely to get from a man of his generation and position. I accepted it with a gracious nod. As Daniel and I walked back to the Westbrook building, a weight lifted from my shoulders. That went better than expected, he observed. Morrison respects competence above all else, I replied. Once he realized, I actually understood his portfolio better than Nathan did. Keeping his business was relatively straightforward. Daniel looked impressed. The Vietnam infrastructure play was inspired. Did you develop that specifically for this meeting? Last night, I admitted. After reviewing his recent foundation board minutes, it was clear they were looking for more aggressive ESG positioning. The Vietnam project checked all their boxes. He shook his head, a new respect in his eyes. Nathan always said Morrison was impossible to please, that he was stuck in the past. Nathan confused Morrison's traditional manner with traditional thinking, I corrected. He's actually quite progressive in his investment philosophy, just conservative in his personal style. A distinction Nathan never bothered to understand. Adash. We entered the Westbrook lobby. Jennifer intercepted us, her expression concerned. Ms. Chen, there's a situation upstairs. Rebecca Taylor has returned to collect her personal belongings and is causing a disruption. I exchanged glances with Daniel. So much for a moment to savor the Morrison victory. Damage control? Daniel offered. Exactly. Find Margaret Chen, have her document everything. If Rebecca is removing anything beyond personal items, we need it recorded. In the elevator, I took a moment to center myself. The Morrison meeting had been a crucial win, but I knew better than to expect Nathan and Rebecca to concede gracefully. They had too much at stake, professionally and personally, to surrender without a fight. When the elevator doors opened on the executive floor, the disruption was immediately apparent. A cluster of employees hovered near Rebecca's former office, their expressions a mix of discomfort and fascination. Raised voices carried down the hallway. Absolutely ridiculous! These files represent 3 years of my work. Rebecca's voice, sharp with indignation. I understand your frustration, Ms. Taylor, but company policy is clear. All work product remains the property of Westbrook Financial. This from Harrison's voice, strained but firm. I approached calmly, noting the security guards hovering nearby, and the IT specialist examining Rebecca's computer. Rebecca Taylor looked markedly different from the polished executive who had smirked beside Nathan at the gala just 2 nights ago. Her sleek bob was slightly disheveled, her designer outfit replaced by casual clothes, her usual confident posture now defensive. A banker's box sat half-filled on her desk, surrounded by scattered files. She turned as I entered, her expression darkening. "Well, if it isn't the puppet CEO herself, come to gloat?" I kept my voice measured, aware of our audience. "Not at all, Rebecca. I came to ensure the transition proceeds smoothly. I understand you're collecting your personal belongings." "Personal? Belongings? They won't let me take anything." 20 client presentations, research files, contact lists, all blocked because suddenly they're proprietary information. The quotation marks were audible in her tone. "Because they are proprietary," I confirmed calmly. "Those materials were developed during your employment at Westbrook, using company resources for company clients. The intellectual property remains with Westbrook." Rebecca's laugh held no humor. "That's rich coming from you. Did you develop your anonymous consulting materials on company time too, or just mine Nathan's client list while playing housewife?" Several employees visibly recoiled at her venom. Harrison stepped forward, attempting to defuse the situation. "Rebecca, we've arranged for HR to review any contested materials. Anything genuinely personal will be returned to you after the standard security check." "This is Nathan's doing, isn't it?" she demanded, ignoring Harrison to focus on me. "He told you about our plans, and this is your revenge." I met her gaze steadily. "Nathan didn't tell me anything, Rebecca. He didn't have to. Forwarding confidential client information to personal email accounts tends to trigger security protocols, as does backdating client agreements for a company that doesn't technically exist yet." Her face paled slightly. She hadn't known we had that level of detail about their planned defection. "You're making a mistake," she said, her voice lower now. "Nathan has connections you can't imagine. People who won't do business with a company run by his vindictive ex-wife." "Perhaps," I acknowledged, stepping closer to her desk. "But based on my meeting with Wallace Morrison just now, those connections may not be as loyal as Nathan believes, especially once they understand who was actually managing their investments all along." The mention of Morrison, Westbrook's largest client and one Rebecca had clearly counted on following them, hit its mark. Her composure finally cracked. "You think you've won?" she hissed, leaning in until we were inches apart. "But you have no idea what it takes to lead in this world. Playing shadow consultant from your comfortable mansion is nothing like standing in the spotlight, the scrutiny, the expectations. You'll crumble within months. And when you do, don't. Expect Nathan to help pick up the pieces." I recognized the words, almost identical to Nathan's parting shot that morning. They'd clearly been discussing me, crafting their narrative of my inevitable failure. "Thank you for your concern," I replied, loud enough for everyone to hear. "But I managed to save Westbrook from the damage you and Nathan were causing while raising a child and maintaining a cover identity. I suspect handling the job openly will actually be easier." Rebecca grabbed her purse, abandoning the half-filled box. "Keep the files. They're outdated anyway. Our new strategies are already miles ahead of anything Westbrook is doing." "Best of luck with that," I replied sincerely. "Innovation is certainly needed in this industry. I look forward to healthy competition." The professional response clearly wasn't what she'd expected. With a final glare that encompassed me, Harrison, and the gathered employees, Rebecca stalked toward the elevator. Margaret Chen appeared at her elbow, security badge in hand. "I'll escort Ms. Taylor to the lobby," Margaret said, her tone leaving no room for argument. As they departed, I turned to the remaining audience. "Show's over, everyone. Let's get back to work." The small crowd dispersed quickly, leaving only Harrison, the security team, and the IT specialist. "Well handled," Harrison murmured as we watched the IT specialist continue her audit of Rebecca's computer. "Though I suspect this is just the opening salvo." "No doubt," I agreed. "How comprehensive is our digital forensics team?" "Among the best. In the industry, Harrison assured me. If Rebecca or Nathan took anything they shouldn't have, we'll know about it. I nodded, already mentally cataloging the potential vulnerabilities. Nathan knew Westbrook's systems intimately, and Rebecca had been instrumental in developing our client management database. Together, they could do significant damage if they chose to. Double the security protocols on the Morrison account, I instructed. And prioritize audits for any other clients Nathan had personal relationships with. I want to reach out to each of them personally by the end of the week. Harrison raised an eyebrow. That's over 30 high-value clients. Then I'd better get started. I turned toward my office, then paused. Oh, and Harrison? Please ask Jennifer to order dinner to be delivered around 7. I have a feeling it's going to be late night. Back in my office, I found Victoria waiting on a secure video call, her expression eager. Well, how did the Morrison meeting go? I allowed myself the first genuine smile of the day. He's staying with Westbrook and implementing my recommendations for the Vietnam infrastructure project. Victoria's answering smile was triumphant. Nathan must be furious. That account alone would have financed half their startup costs. Speaking of Nathan, I said, sobering, Rebecca just made quite the scene collecting her belongings. Their counteroffensive is beginning. Expected, Victoria replied with a businesslike nod. But countering it will be easier now that you have Morrison's endorsement. In this industry, money talks louder than anything else. She was right, of course. Retaining Westbrook's largest client was more than a financial win. It was a powerful statement about my leadership capabilities that would resonate throughout the investment community. As Victoria and I discussed strategy for the coming days, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Ethan wants to know if you're still coming to his science presentation tonight. Says he understands if you're too busy. My heart clenched. In the whirlwind of the day, Morrison, Rebecca, the constant demands of my new position, I'd nearly forgotten Ethan's school science showcase. One moment, I told Victoria, quickly typing a response. Absolutely coming. Nothing is more important. Tell him to save me a seat in the front row. When I returned my attention to the video call, Victoria was watching me with an unreadable expression. Everything okay? Yes, I replied firmly. Just confirming my attendance at Ethan's science showcase tonight. It starts at 7:30. Victoria's eyebrows rose slightly. In the middle of your first crisis as CEO? The market won't stop just because your son has a school event. Her response reminded me why, despite our friendship and professional alliance, Victoria and I had chosen different paths. For her, career had always come first, personal life a distant second. It was a perspective I'd once shared, before Ethan, before I'd discovered that success without balance wasn't success at all. The market will be there tomorrow, I said simply. Ethan's presentation won't. We'll continue this discussion in the morning. As I ended the call, I thought about Nathan's assertion that I would crumble under the pressure of public leadership. Perhaps he was right that the scrutiny would be intense, the expectations nearly impossible to meet. But he had fundamentally misunderstood what real strength looked like. For 8 years, I had maintained a precarious balance between my secret career, my family responsibilities, and the facade of the perfect corporate wife. I had worked double shifts, days as a mother and community volunteer, nights as a financial strategist, without recognition or support. Leading Westbrook openly, with all the resources of the company at my disposal and the freedom to integrate my personal and professional lives authentically, that wouldn't be harder. That would be liberation. I buzzed Jennifer. Please clear my schedule from 7 to 9 p.m. I'm attending my son's science showcase, and let's move the client calls forward if possible. I'd like to reach at least 5 of Nathan's former accounts before I leave. As Jennifer reworked my schedule, I turned to the window, gazing out at Chicago's financial district. Somewhere out there, Nathan and Rebecca were plotting their next move, convinced that my success was temporary, that just a housewife couldn't possibly maintain her grip on the corporate ladder. They didn't understand that I had never been just anything. And now, finally, neither did anyone else. 6 months had passed since the night of the Westbrook Financial Gala when my husband's dismissive introduction as just a housewife had preceded Harrison Reed's announcement naming me as CEO. Half a lie. Year of 14-hour days, constantly proving myself to skeptical clients, rebuilding the company's executive team, and navigating the media's relentless scrutiny of the housewife CEO, as financial blogs had dubbed me. Yet as I stood at the podium in Westbrook's auditorium on this crisp spring morning, surveying the assembled employees and board members, I felt none of the uncertainty that had occasionally plagued me during those first tumultuous weeks. The company quarterly results displayed on the screen behind me told the story more eloquently than any defense I could have mounted. Westbrook Financial was thriving. 23% growth in our sustainable investment division, I summarized, highlighting the most impressive metric. 12 new institutional clients, a 17% increase in assets under management, and perhaps most significantly, client retention at 97%, the highest in Westbrook's history. The applause that rose from the audience held genuine enthusiasm rather than the cautious support of those early meetings. These numbers weren't just good, they were exceptional by any industry standard, especially given the turbulent transition in leadership. These results reflect the extraordinary talent and dedication of every person in this room, I continued, making eye contact with key team members. When I stepped into this role 6 months ago, I promised that Westbrook would become a place where innovation is rewarded, where ethical investing isn't just a marketing slogan, but a core philosophy, and where every contribution is recognized, regardless of title or tenure. In the front row, Margaret Chen nodded approvingly. Now serving as Westbrook's first-ever Chief Diversity Officer, she has been instrumental in transforming our corporate culture. Beside her sat Daniel Park, recently promoted to Chief Investment Officer after his exceptional handling of the expanded Chicago division. As we look toward the future, our trajectory is clear. I clicked to the next slide, revealing Westbrook's ambitious 5-year plan. The official opening of our Chicago Sustainable Investment Center next month marks the beginning of Westbrook's most significant expansion in a decade. The Tokyo and Singapore offices will follow in Q3, positioning us to capitalize on the explosive growth in Asia's green infrastructure sector. The presentation continued with detailed projections and strategic initiatives, each backed by the rigorous analysis that had become Westbrook's hallmark under my leadership. Gone were the vague promises and relationship-based assurances of the previous era. In their place, transparent metrics, clear accountability, and a bold vision that had attracted top talent from across the industry. When the formal presentation concluded and the audience dispersed to their departments, Harrison Reed approached, looking more relaxed than I'd seen him in years. Retirement suited him, the constant travel, advisory board positions, and philanthropic work keeping him engaged without the stress of day-to-day operations. "Remarkable results, Olivia," he said, with genuine admiration in his voice. "I knew you'd succeed, but I didn't anticipate this level of performance." I smiled, remembering his initial hesitation when Victoria and I had first proposed the leadership transition. "Thank you, Harrison. Coming from you, that means a great deal." He glanced around to ensure we wouldn't be overheard. "Have you heard the latest about Nathan and Rebecca's venture?" I nodded. The financial community was small, and news traveled. Asked, "Struggling to secure Series B funding from what my sources tell me. Turns out client acquisition is more challenging when you can't rely on Westbrook's reputation and resources." Harrison's expression held a mixture of sadness and resignation. "Nathan called me last week. First time since everything happened. Said he might be interested in returning to Westbrook in some capacity." This was news. "And what? Did you tell him?" "That any employment decisions rest solely with the current CEO. Harrison studied me carefully. "He's talented, Olivia. Always has been. Just not in the ways he believed." I considered this assessment fair in its way. Nathan possessed genuine charm and relationship-building skills that had served Westbrook well when they weren't undermined by his sense of entitlement and ethical shortcuts. If he applies through proper channels and is willing to accept appropriate oversight, I'd consider it, I said finally. Westbrook evaluates candidates based on their qualifications and potential contributions, not personal history. Harrison seemed satisfied with this response. You've built something extraordinary here, Olivia. Something that will outlast all of us. As he departed for his lunch with board members, I returned to my office. No longer Nathan's corner suite, but a redesigned space that better reflected my leadership philosophy. Gone was the imposing mahogany desk that had dominated the room, like a throne. In its place, a more functional workspace surrounded by comfortable seating arrangements designed to facilitate collaboration rather than intimidation. Jennifer looked up as I entered. The Tokyo investors are confirmed for tomorrow's video conference, and Ethan's school called. He won first place in the regional mathematics competition. My heart swelled with pride. Thank you, Jennifer. Can you send flowers to his classroom? And let's move dinner reservations to include ice cream at that place he loves. Already done, Jennifer replied with a knowing smile. She'd quickly adapted to my integrated approach to work and family, helping me carve out sacred time for Ethan amidst the demands of running a global financial firm. I settled at my desk, reviewing preparations for tomorrow's investor meeting while eating the lunch Jennifer had arranged, a far cry from the days when I'd squeezed financial analysis between preparing Ethan's lunch and maintaining the facade of the perfect corporate wife. Now, my work happened in daylight, my expertise acknowledged, my contribution valued. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. CNN Business wants to interview us both for their Women in Finance special. Tell them to contact your PR team. So proud of you, daughter. I smiled, imagining my biochemist mother discussing financial leadership alongside me. She'd become something of a media darling in her own right, frequently quoted about raising a daughter to break barriers in male-dominated fields. The press had been particularly fascinated by our parallel journeys, 2 generations of women navigating professional advancement while balancing family responsibilities. A soft knock at my door preceded Victoria's entrance. As the primary external advisor on Westbrook's expansion strategy, she divided her time between her own firm and our headquarters. Impressive numbers today, she said, settling into a chair across from me. The board is practically giddy. They should be. Their support during the transition was instrumental in our success. I studied my friend, noting the subtle changes in her demeanor over recent months. Always driven and focused, Victoria had initially struggled to understand my insistence on work-life integration, viewing it as a potential weakness in a CEO. Now, observing Westbrook's performance under my leadership, she'd begun incorporating more balance into her own professional life, even accepting a mentoring role with our new analyst program, something she would have dismissed as a waste of time. A year ago, have you seen the latest from Financial Times? She asked, sliding her tablet across the desk. I glanced down at the headline. Reed Taylor partners seeking merger opportunities as funding stalls. The article detailed how Nathan and Rebecca's venture, launched with such confidence 6 months, ago, was now pursuing acquisition talks with several mid-tier firms. Not surprising, I observed, returning the tablet. Their strategy was fundamentally flawed, too dependent on poaching Westbrook clients, not enough original vision. Victoria nodded. Word is they're approaching Meridian Capital. Significantly smaller operation but stable. Nathan would have to accept a substantial demotion from his founding partner title. Probably for the best, I replied, feeling a surprising lack of satisfaction at Nathan's struggles. Time and success had mellowed my perspective. What had once felt like personal betrayal now seemed merely unfortunate, a talented individual undone by his own worst instincts. Speaking of titles, Victoria continued, the Forbes Most Powerful Women in Finance list comes out next week. My sources say you're in the top 5. I laughed, shaking my head at the irony. Not bad for just a housewife. Victoria's expression grew serious. You know, when we first conceived this plan 5 years ago, I saw it primarily as a business strategy. Acquire controlling interest in an undervalued company, install better management, and improve performance. Standard private equity playbook. But I didn't fully grasp what it meant for you personally. The reclaiming of your identity. The validation of your expertise. She leaned forward, uncharacteristically earnest. I'm not sure I could have done what you did. Maintained that double life for so long without becoming bitter or losing yourself in the process. I considered this rare moment of vulnerability from my usually pragmatic friend. It wasn't always easy, I admitted. There were nights I questioned everything, whether the deception was worth it, whether I'd ever be able to step out of the shadows. But in a strange way, those years of anonymity forced me to separate my worth from external validation. Meaning? I knew my strategies were successful because they worked, not because of my title or connections. There's a certain purity in that. Being judged solely on the merit of your ideas, not your pedigree or appearance or gender. Victoria nodded thoughtfully. Well, now you're being judged in the full glare of public scrutiny and still outperforming everyone's expectations, including mine. And I already thought you were brilliant. The intercom buzzed, Jennifer's voice breaking, our moment of reflection. Ms. Chen, your 3 o'clock is here. The Milwaukee Pension Fund representatives. Thank you, Jennifer. I'll be right with them. I stood, gathering my materials for the meeting. Strategy session tomorrow morning? I want to review the Singapore projections before the board presentation. Victoria rose as well, returning to her usual businesslike demeanor. Absolutely. I've asked Daniel to join us. His analysis of the regional regulatory requirements is impressive. As Victoria departed, I took a moment to center myself before the pension fund meeting. 6 months into my tenure as CEO, these transitions between strategic discussions, client meetings, and personal moments had become more seamless. The compartmentalization that had once been necessary for survival now felt like an outdated habit, gradually replaced by a more integrated approach to leadership. The day concluded with a triumphant celebration at Ethan's favorite ice cream parlor, where he enthusiastically recounted every detail of his mathematics competition victory while demolishing a massive sundae. And then for the final question, they gave us this really tricky probability problem, he explained, gesturing with his spoon. But I remembered what you taught me about conditional probability, Mom, and I solved it when nobody else could. Mother beamed across the table, as proud of her grandson as she was of me. Mathematical talent runs in the family. Your grandfather would have been over the moon. Do you think Dad knows I won? Ethan asked suddenly, his expression growing more serious. The question pierced my heart. Despite my best efforts to maintain Ethan's relationship with his father, Nathan's contact had become increasingly sporadic as the humiliation of his professional setbacks deepened. While he never explicitly canceled his scheduled weekends with Ethan, last-minute emergency meetings had become frustratingly common. I'm sure he'll be very proud when he hears, I replied carefully. Why don't you call him after we get home? Ethan nodded, though his enthusiasm had dimmed slightly. At 11, he was old enough to recognize the pattern of his father's gradual withdrawal, but still young enough to hope for change. My phone vibrated with an incoming call, the Tokyo office. Number. Despite my strict rule about work-free family dinners, the international time difference sometimes necessitated exceptions. I need to take this quickly, I explained, stepping away from the table. Order me another scoop of mint chocolate chip. For when I get back. The call was brief, but consequential. Confirmation that the Japanese pension consortium had agreed to our investment terms. A major victory for our Asian expansion. As I ended the call and prepared to return to the table, I noticed my reflection in the ice cream parlor's window. The corporate CEO on the phone. Mother celebrating her son's achievement. Daughter reconnecting with her parents. the compartmentalized woman I'd been for 8 years would have found this integration of identities impossible to navigate. But standing there, watching my mother and son laughing together while waiting for my return, I realized that this integration wasn't just possible. It was the true measure of success I'd been seeking all along. Back at the table, I slipped my phone into my purse and fully rejoined the celebration, listening to Ethan's animated description of his upcoming science project. The contrast with family dinners during my corporate wife years was striking. Then, I'd been physically present but mentally divided, always calculating, planning, hiding. Now, despite the enormous responsibilities of my position, I could be fully present in these moments because I was finally fully myself in all aspects of my life. As we finished our ice cream and prepared to leave, my mother linked her arm through mine. "You know what makes me proudest?" she asked quietly. "What's that?" She nodded toward Ethan, who walked ahead of us, still buzzing with excitement. "He sees you, the real you, not just fragments or roles, but the whole brilliant, complex woman. Do you have any idea what that will mean for him? To grow up with that example?" The observation caught me off guard, bringing unexpected tears to my eyes. In all my strategic planning, all my careful calculations about reclaiming my career and professional identity, I had sometimes overlooked this most profound consequence. The model I was providing for my son about authenticity, perseverance, and the integration of ambition with compassion. 3 weeks later, I stood on the podium at the grand opening of Westbrook's Chicago Sustainable Investment Center, the culmination of the vision I'd begun developing 3 years earlier as an anonymous consultant. The gleaming glass building represented everything the new Westbrook stood for: innovative by design, environmentally responsible in execution, and positioned at the intersection of profit and purpose. As I prepared to cut the ceremonial ribbon, I scanned the crowd of employees, clients, media representatives, and local officials. Ethan stood front and center, my mother beside him, both beaming with pride. Daniel Park and the Chicago team were gathered to my right, their expressions reflecting well-earned satisfaction after months of tireless work. Harrison Reed stood with the board members, his posture relaxed but his eyes alert, watching his legacy evolve in unexpected but gratifying ways. And then, at the very back of the crowd, a familiar figure caught my attention. Nathan stood alone, observing the proceedings with an unreadable expression. Our eyes met briefly across the distance, and after a moment's hesitation, he offered a small nod, not quite congratulatory, not entirely gracious, but perhaps the closest thing to acknowledgement he could manage. I returned the nod, then redirected my attention to the celebration at hand. Nathan's presence was a footnote now, not the defining factor it had once been. Whether he had come to witness his former company's success out of regret, curiosity, or some complex mixture of emotions didn't particularly matter. The story unfolding before us was no longer about Nathan Reed's wife or even Nathan Reed's betrayal. It was about Olivia Chen, who had transformed from hidden architect to visible leader, who had reclaimed not just her career, but her complete identity, who had proven that being underestimated could become the greatest strategic advantage if one had the patience and vision to use it wisely. "It is my great honor," I began, addressing the assembled crowd, "to officially open the Westbrook Chicago Sustainable Investment Center, the physical embodiment of our commitment to financial innovation, environmental responsibility, and inclusive leadership." As my words carried across the plaza, I caught Ethan's eye. He gave me a thumbs up, his face radiant with uncomplicated pride. In that moment, with the spring sun warming my shoulders and the future stretching bright before me, I felt the final pieces of my fragmented self fully integrate. No more hiding, no more diminishing, no more just anything. The ribbon fell away beneath the ceremonial scissors, and the crowd erupted in applause. Behind me, the building that had begun as my secret vision now stood complete, visible, tangible, undeniable. A perfect metaphor for the journey that had brought me here, from shadow to substance, from dismissed to essential. As I descended from the podium to join my family and colleagues in celebration, I thought about that moment 6 months ago in the Westbrook Ballroom, when Nathan's dismissive introduction had preceded the revelation that would transform both our lives. "She's just a housewife, folks. Makes a fantastic pot roast, though." The memory no longer stung. Instead, it reminded me of an essential truth I would carry forward in my leadership of Westbrook Financial, in my relationship with my son, and in my continued evolution as Olivia Chen. The most dangerous thing you can do to a capable person is underestimate them. And the most powerful thing they can do in response is prove exactly who they are. I had done exactly that. Not with anger or vengeance, but with excellence, integrity, and the quiet confidence of a woman who had finally stepped fully into her light. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.